Collins & Co.'s not-for-profit conference, Be Empowered Through Knowledge, is designed specifically for the not-for-profit sector. Our speakers are experts in this sector, and their practical approach provides not-for-profit board members and management with the opportunity to improve their skills and knowledge across a range of specialist topics. The conference also provides a great networking opportunity. Partner Paul Kelly introduces our next speaker.
Our next presenter, as you would be aware, is Meredith Lewis. She is a trainer, consultant, project designer at Dangerous Meredith. Meredith has over 25 years' experience working in the tertiary, creative and community sectors, including as a manager, project manager, trainer, arts, manager, choreographer and performer. So if you'd like to all welcome Meredith to the stage, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for coming today, and what a stunning venue. I turned up all excited and then my jaw dropped when I walked out. I'd forgotten how beautiful the MCG is. But, you know, on this beautiful day in such a beautiful venue, in such a beautiful location, it reminds me to say the most important thing I think I have to say in this presentation, which is to acknowledge that we're on the country of the Kulin Nation. So I want to pay my respects and acknowledge them as the traditional owners and custodians of this land. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders of any other nation who might be here with us today. So thanks a lot for coming. Oops, second slide, I've mucked it up already. There we go. So that's me, Dangerous Meredith, and people wonder why on earth I call myself that. You know, they meet me and they say, oh, you're actually really very nice. Well, that's a bonus, that's an add-on extra. But I call myself Dangerous Meredith because what I do is I'm basically a conversationalist. I go in and help groups of people have the right conversation around things that may be blocking them, especially things to do with culture, innovation, creativity, and all the plans that are supporting those things. I tend to ask a lot of questions. I encourage people to ask each other the right questions. I encourage people to look at things from different angles, to come up with a fresh perspective. Now, whether or not you find that dangerous is kind of up to you. Hopefully you'll find it really rather nice, but that's really an indication of what we're going to do today. I thought of this topic in consultation with Collins & Co. when we were thinking of a really good, useful topic for me to present on today. And one of my pet irritations over the years has been the sight of business plans not really connecting or supporting the organisations they were developed by. I think there's a number of reasons for this. I think sometimes plans are written in a tearing hurry. We're all often very time poor and under a lot of stress, maybe not supported by resources, be they human, time, money or whatever, as we would like to be. Maybe we don't get as much time to consult with our stakeholders. Maybe we do all that stuff, but once the business plan is written, it somehow gets forgotten. It gets parked in that bottom drawer or marooned on somebody's desktop and not kind of connected into the day-to-day lives of organisations. So it seems to me that sometimes there's a disconnect between the actual planning process or the written plan and life as it is lived in organisations. So what I'm going to do today, and also in response to Collins & Co.'s request that I make this into an interactive session, is I'm going to present to you a series of ideas or provocations or questions for you to think of. I'm going to allow time during this session for you to talk together in your groups on your table. I'll be very careful with the time because I don't want to run over time and muck up the next presenter's time frame. But you'll get a chance to briefly interact with other people in your table. If you're sitting by yourself, you might want to move and join in another table. And hopefully at the end of this session, you'll feel able to go back to your organisations with some fresh ideas or some fresh perspectives, or even the right questions to ask your co-workers or your board or your key staff and volunteers, to get them to help you write a good business plan that feels relevant, a business plan that feels responsive and dynamic and evolving and connected to what you're actually doing day by day. Those are my contact details, but I'll flash that slide up right at the very end. But by all means, please keep in touch. And if anybody's on Twitter, and I love Twitter, do feel free to live tweet this presentation if you like. And if you do tweet it, that's my Twitter handle, so you can refer to me there. So without further ado, let's move on. Let's start right at the very beginning. When do you develop business plans and why? Actually, I might just backtrack. Can I have a show of hands? Who here has written a business plan? Most of you, that's great. Has anybody not ever written one? Yep, one or two. And nil desperandum, because it's, I was talking to this lady down the front here, there's a lot of resources online to help you learn how to write a business plan. But if you've worked in the not-for-profit sector, I'm sure you've written other things like grant writing and some persuasive writing. The skills are quite transferable, but it's more about getting the right concepts in line and enshrining them in a good template. What sectors are we all from? Are there any of my fellow brethren from the arts sector? Yep, one over there, hello. Anybody from the community sector, which I've also worked in? Quite a few of you. Yep, good on you. Tertiary sector. I've also worked there, another lady over there. How about any other sectors? Does anybody want to yell out? Where are you from? Health? Any others? Scientists, yep. Legal? Great. So the point I want to make is that we're a really mixed bunch of people, which is fantastic. How many of you would identify coming from a large organisation, say over 200 employees? Yeah, a couple of you. Medium size, say between 15 to 199, a few of you. And a small. Yeah, most of you, yeah. So there might be different challenges according to the size of organisation in terms of writing a business plan as a living document. There might be different challenges according to which sector you're in and what is going on in that sector, policy-wise or regulation-wise or whatever. So this is why I thought it would be good to have an interactive session, because maybe you could compare notes with people from other sectors. But depending on what your organisation is doing, I was curious as to why and when you do develop plans. Is developing a business plan a process that you own internally? Your organisation feels that it underpins the way they operate? Is it something that feels very much imposed by external needs? Maybe a funding body requires it as part of your compliance regime? Or is it a mixture of both? You can see the logic in having a business plan, but the way you write it and the way you develop it is also informed by the needs of stakeholders. I was wondering if just for really quickly, for say 2 minutes on your tables, if you could talk together about what circumstances surround you when you write that business plan. Why do you write it? Don't finish, but pause the conversation. I'll throw you another question to throw into this conversation. Think about your stakeholders, internal and external. I think that's something that marks life in the not-for-profit sector, is that we all have to deal with quite a diverse and mixed range of stakeholders. So continue on with this conversation for maybe another minute or two, but think about those stakeholders. Are you answering the needs of any stakeholders? Any funding bodies who want to see a business plan? Any tricky stakeholder needs that require the development of a good business plan? So, yeah, maybe another 1 to 2 minutes and then we'll report back. I'm sorry to interrupt. I wish I could give you more time to talk together. It's good to see such a buzz or hear such a buzz of conversation in the room, but we've got to keep an eye on the time. I'm just wondering, and I believe we have a microphone, does anybody want to share some thought they had or something they discussed about, or maybe a quandary they have about why and when they might write a business plan and how working with stakeholders might influence that? Anybody? Can anybody be bold? There's somebody over there. Yep, thank you.
Well, I was just saying, we're both from Disability Resource Council in Geelong, and we're one of the trial areas for the NDIS, and there's different things that have come up where they've done one way, they've realised it hasn't worked, so they've done it another. But from our organisational perspective, it's marrying your mission statement in with your clients.
Yep.
And your stakeholders.
Yep.
Not just our client base, but we try and link with our local businesses, providers. So, I think it just underpins a good organisation. It takes work and time, but it's all those underpinnings of a really, I think it's the building blocks for a sustainable organisation.
Yeah, fantastic point. And I think you used the word culture there. You maybe had the microphone away, but how different groups of stakeholders have different cultures as well. Thank you. That's a great point. And it kind of, what I was thinking of actually when I put together this slide and decided to include this little bit of conversation in the presentation. In spring, I think it was spring last year, I went to a really good lecture at RMIT given by a man called Professor Lee Parker, who's from the School of Accountancy at RMIT. But he specialises in governance with not-for-profit boards. It was a really good lecture, but I was really gratified to hear him say that he feels that compared to for-profit businesses, running a not-for-profit organisation is incredibly complex. And he feels that one of the reasons is that the range of stakeholders and their different cultures that not-for-profits have to deal with is extraordinarily complex. So you've got, of course, funding bodies, government funding bodies, philanthropic funding bodies. You've got the communities you've set up your organisation to help, your most important stakeholders. But you might also offer fee-for-service to make money, and you might have a community of customers. Internal stakeholders, you've got staff, but you may also have volunteers who may have very different needs. So I think I'm not here to offer you, unfortunately, I can't offer you a silver bullet and a pat template as to how to make a business plan a living document. It's going to vary depending on that mix of stakeholders you've got to deal with and your conditions. But I do think it's really thinking about the complexity. I think we've got to acknowledge that it exists, that dealing with all those stakeholders claims a lot of time and focus, and that can weigh you down with obligations and constraints when it comes to developing a good business plan, and not just developing it, implementing it and reviewing it. So there are obligations, but on the plus side, there might be opportunities as well. Opportunities to animate and involve those stakeholders, opportunities, if we can think creatively, of different ways of reaching out to the stakeholders, depending on their culture and their expectations. So I'm hoping during this presentation we'll spark a few ideas around how to do that. I'm not fond of handing out PAP templates, not to a room as diverse as this. I mean, I love a bloody good template, and it's great to be able to go to Google and download them and use them, but it would be irresponsible of me to stand up here with a bullet-pointed slide and say to all of you, this is how you should do it, because it might not apply to people depending on their situation. But one admonition I will lay on you is that you can't leave the development of a business plan to the last minute. I mean, you can and you do, and I've had to in the past, and it's irritated me enormously because it's such a wasted opportunity. I understand why sometimes people do leave the writing of these things to the last minute. You've got a deadline, you've got to hand it in as part of your compliance to a funding body, say. You just are so time poor and under the gun in the day-to-day running of your organisation that you haven't had time to do the consultation you wanted to have the discussions that you wanted to reflect how you wanted to. So I get it, it's hard, but it's such a lost opportunity. So the major challenge is to think of the development, the implementation and the reviewing of a business plan as an ongoing process. Don't wait until the business plan time period, if it's a 2 to 3 year plan, don't wait till the end of the 3 years. As you're developing it, challenge yourself over the next 2 to 3 years to find points of review, find points where you can go out and test ideas, take the pulse of how the plan is being implemented, how it sits with people. And I think that's a major challenge, but I think it has to be done if you're going to turn a business plan into a living document. Later in the presentation, I'll fling a couple of ideas as to how you might do that, and you might be able to think of more. You might have seen this quote. It's oft-quoted, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." So you can have the most beautifully worded strategy or plan in the world, but if the team of people who have to live with that plan, if there's something in the culture of that team that makes them resistant to it, or resistant to each other, self-sabotaging, then your beautifully worded plan is not going to work. So this talk is going to be a lot about culture. Just moving on. But before we get to this bit, I again wanted to give you another really quick 2 minutes to talk on your tables, just thinking about that last point on culture. And I'm just wondering if you could be so bold as to share with each other what kind of culture surrounds the development of a business plan. And the lady down the back pointed out that stakeholders can have different cultures. I've worked with groups of people who were resistant to the very idea of writing a plan itself. They felt it sounded too commercial, too foreign to their social justice aims or their artistic aims, whatever it was. I found people who treated it very much as a necessary evil, as a tick-the-box compliance measure. Just do the bloody thing, get it out of the way and move on to real life. So could you maybe talk amongst each other about the culture you're surrounded by as you develop this thing? Are you supported, or are you going to have to try and find ways of taking your audience with you, so to speak? Okay, 2 minutes. Time is ticking away. This is no doubt another conversation that you could spend half a day on, I think. Very important. Does anybody want to share a thought they might have had or something they heard or said just during that conversation? Yeah, a lady down here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm on the board of a very highly regarded but fairly small youth work agency in rural Victoria, and it would be fair to say that we decided we had to go back to separating strategic plan and business plan, partly for compliance reasons, and we more or less had let's get the bloody thing done attitude. But we've actually, I think, started changing lately, and this is encapsulated by thinking during your presentation, that we actually need to look at it as a guide for what we want to achieve for our clients this year. And I think that will make it a much more enjoyable process. And probably a more realistic document too.
Fantastic. Okay, that's a great tip, really, from this. I think that, business plans can be these sprawling, complicated documents. depending how you write them. I've seen business plans, I swear, that were the size of a regional telephone directory. And it's easy to get submerged and lost in all that detail. But I think this lady pointed out something incredibly important, that your organisation's decided to come from the focus of the services you're going to offer to your community. And I think it's really important not to lose sight of that underpinning your business plan should be those essential core ideas, and cling on to them like mad as you're writing them. Great to hear that you've come up with a strategy to make it enjoyable. Why not? I love writing business plans, I really do, because that's when you take a vision and make it tangible. It should be tremendously exciting. And it could be the writing of it and then the tracking of progress during the implementation could be a wonderful opportunity to reach out to your stakeholders and involve them. And there's, depending on what your organisation is like, there's a lot of ways you might want to do that. I mean, if you have regular staff meetings, get them to do a SWOT analysis on a regular basis about aspects of the business plan. Get them to do, and I'll talk about risk management, for example, later on, but get them to do regular risk management exercises. Get them to review your marketing plan. But it could be the same with community consultation sessions you have with the community you're working with. If you're in an organisation that's lucky enough to be resourced so that you have an in-house intranet or something like Yammer or some social learning or social media type setup, get people talking on that. It could be as much as asking one question. I know of one social learning consultant who went in and helped a business set up an in-house online forum. And she just coached their managers in asking one relevant question each day and asking for people to answer that. But that generated a lot of really helpful dialogue for those managers. So, yeah, cling on to those core ideas and think of ways of reaching out to your stakeholders in ways that are enjoyable and inspiring. Just moving right along, I think I've got my slides a little out of sequence. What I want to touch on really quickly, and in my mind they're kind of related because they both have a lot to do with managing organisations and writing business plans in times of uncertainty. So it depends on your sector, of course, but I think the not-for-profit sector has been going through a lot of uncertainty recently in terms of regulation, policy, funding. It always feels like a kind of a risky sector to work in for many reasons, I think. So a big challenge can be, how do you write a plan that's supposed to cover a time period of maybe 1, 2, even 3 years, but things are apt to change for your organisation. I've been working on business plans over the last couple of years for a couple of organisations who are really well-run organisations, very well-run, and had very clear strategic goals, terrific at marketing and branding. When it came to doing the financial plan, they kicked. They said, can't do it, won't do it. I cannot project cash flow for the next 6 months. I just can't. So that was a reflection of the uncertainty surrounding them. I quite understood their quandary. So how do you plan if there are parts of your future that feel like they're hanging in the balance? And then also, how do you plan for innovation? I love innovation, it's fun, it's necessary. That old cliche, innovate or die, is true. But innovation entails changing things. It is a risky process. All innovation entails a certain amount of calculated risk. So it also brings uncertainty, hopefully uncertainty in the service of doing something positive, but still it brings a certain amount of uncertainty. So how do you build a plan around a process of innovation where you're almost cultivating experimentation, where guaranteed outcomes don't exist? So I'll go back to this slide. A reflection I want to share from you from my time actually working in the arts industry, when I became an arts manager, project manager, and I had to help a lot of arts groups write project or business plans or strategies. And it was basically taking their creative ideas, sometimes really mad ideas, gloriously innovative, experimental ideas, and helping them work towards a tangible outcome. So what I learnt, what those wonderful artists sort of taught me, was that you should plan, of course, because you need something to anchor the process, the creative process. You need something that will steer you and your group towards that tangible outcome. Also, when you write a business plan, you're defining the constraints, the context, the boundaries, the conditions you're working within. So think of that act of definition as the outside of the frame. And it's very important to do that. But what's really essential, if you're either dealing with a lot of risk or a lot of unknowns, a lot of variables, where you know your organisation might have to think on their feet a bit, or if you're deliberately implementing innovation, testing and experimenting with new products or services or even new processes, you've got to create space for that change to happen, to accommodate it. If you don't create space, you'll come a cropper. You'll either squelch creative thinking, and you'll shut down on the opportunity for those glorious sort of tangents of creative thinking that can come up. Or if you have to respond to something risky, you won't leave yourself the time or space to do it. But the thing is, a good business plan allows you to do that, and there are elements of a good business plan where you can spot the opportunity to go in and create room to move and space. That's what I think. That's what I found when I worked with these groups that were often under-resourced and often meeting scary deadlines but doing really experimental stuff. I saw that there was a way. So for the rest of the talk, we've got about 15 minutes left. I want to look at just a couple of parts of the business planning process where you can actually go in and do that. Find the time and space to speculate, to problem solve, while still working within that trusty framework. Okay? So I think I might just keep on going. One thing I want you to consider, one of those means of finding the time and space is the area of evaluation. Over the last couple of years, I've been lucky to work with a really great consultant called Dr. Louise Greenstock, and she specialises in consultation techniques for the not-for-profit sector. And the point she makes is that a lot of people, because they're often time poor and under pressure, but a lot of organisations tend to think of evaluation as something that happens right at the end. And again, it can be another tick-the-box compliance measure. But her contention is that you should give your evaluation methods the same kind of serious thought as you do in planning or developing a business plan from the get-go. And she and I, in discussing and working together, came of the view that really you should be thinking of ways during the implementation period of the plan of popping in evaluation methods. So it's an ongoing process. It doesn't get left to the last minute and kind of forgotten. Another point Louise used to make is that good evaluation means that you have to be super, super, super clear on what you're actually measuring, which sounds a bit, of course you do, but it's something, again, that can be forgotten in the hurly-burly of managing an organisation, and in the complexity of developing a plan, it can be forgotten. You can lose sight of that. So in terms of evaluation, you need to challenge yourselves to be very clear about what it is you're measuring, and you need to think of ways of evaluating. It doesn't have to be super formal, but ways of evaluating progress as you go through. And I just touched on some of those, maybe going into a regular staff meeting and setting some kind of exercise, conducting a little bit of Q&A or inviting in some of your stakeholders, for open days, getting them to fill in a survey. Could be as simple as sending out an email and asking for a response. Hey guys, that new thing we're trying over this few months, how do you think it's going? I'm working with a small social enterprise right now, and they don't have a lot of resources, but what they've figured out, and they have the added constraint of the fact that all their staff are part-time, so they never work in the same room together. But they do have Dropbox, and they've just put a Word document on Dropbox, writing about the things that they want to talk about, and they just have a commitment to each other that every Friday they're just going to go in and brain dump and respond and correspond that way, which I think is beaut. So think about implementing some good evaluation methods during the life of the business plan. When you come to write a new business plan, that means you've got material at your fingertips. You're not caught up in a last minute, oh my gosh, we've got to write this thing and consult a heap of people really quickly, but you've been doing it all along. It gives people buy-in into the business plan. And again, you can set it up, just thinking about the early point about the different culture of different stakeholders. You can come up with dialogue methods that allow for those differences in culture, but still allow people to buy into your business plan. The other thing this does is it serves a purpose around knowledge management. So if you're regularly asking people to buy in, you're seeing how much your staff know, not just how much, but the type of knowledge they have from their different perspective. Same with the stakeholders too, I shouldn't just talk about staff. You can see where there might be gaps of knowledge, and you might come across pockets of knowledge or pockets of passion or curiosity that surprise you, that you realise you can work with. And this is all about communication. I don't know why I even put that slide in there. This whole talk is really about communication. So it's about finding those terrific communication forums. Can I give you just another 2 minutes? Just thinking about what I just babbled through just then, evaluation techniques, knowledge management and communication. And in your tables, maybe just share with each other some of the ways in which you communicate with those precious stakeholders. I'm going to try really hard to finish on time. I think it's really important, out of respect for the next speaker and yourselves. But does anybody want to quickly yell out a really innovative or interesting or useful way they have of communicating with stakeholders? Anyone? No? A dearth of ideas? Oh, here we go. No, please go.
An iPad in reception that the clients can fill in suggestions and their thoughts on the service they're receiving.
Great. Okay, so that's just one example. So it can be offline or online, face-to-face. It can be very informal, still very powerful, or formal, but just bear that in mind. Just going to gallop through the last few slides. You may be able to think of other parts of a business plan. When we think of a business plan structure, roughly different templates vary, or different ways of writing them vary, but roughly you've got 4 sub-plans with financial, legal, management, operational and marketing. And you might look through your own business plan template and pick out bits where you think, oh, I could turn that into a really good discussion, either online or off. For me, one of my favourites, but one I think gets overlooked, is risk management. I'm called Dangerous Meredith, so you better believe I love a good risk management discussion. People think risk management can either be boring or a bit worrying, so they want to avoid it. I actually think it's a really good opportunity to get people around a table, get people brainstorming all the things that can go wrong, then congratulate them on being sensible and realistic. By the way, while they're doing that, take the pulse of the culture in the room, see what people are scared of, what they're anxious about. It might be different from you and your perspective, so it's a good opportunity to do that. Then get people to brainstorm the strategies for mitigating risk. And this can be great. Again, it can be another Yay Team moment. You can say to them, well, aren't we great coming up with all these great strategies? We're creative problem solvers, we're realists, and we can cope with stuff. That's really good to know. Take note of where the gaps of knowledge are, and again, where people are anxious. And this is where you might be able to answer some of those anxieties or those gaps in knowledge with, say, some professional development or some other kind of training or some resourcing. And if your brainstorming session goes really well, then you could be looking at some really innovative ideas. Often when we're dealing with constraints, that's when the glorious light bulb moments happen. So risk management, in my head, is one step away from innovation and not to be scared of. Another area you might like to think of where you could really involve people is your branding. All of those outward-facing aspects of your business wherein you manifest your values and your mission. A very creative area. So again, get people to buy in on aspects of branding, the people who are your customer service, frontline customer service. Involve them in a conversation about it. Absolutely involve the community you're working with and how they perceive you. I'm sure there are a lot of ways you could think of how to use branding. I've mentioned professional development. If your staff and volunteers and your directors are aware that the professional development you're setting up for them links into the development of a business plan, again, they're going to feel that connection with the business plan and a buy-in. And they'll be able to also maybe bring in fresh knowledge and ideas to help you develop that business plan. And I just wanted to finish up, just one little word of warning too. I've been at, yeah, I love that photo too. I've been at discussions where people had assumed prior to the discussion that they had decided on a certain outcome, and they talked about it in terms of words like quality or I don't know, just think of some weasel word that is easily misinterpreted, community consultation. And people assume that they know what each other means, but sometimes people don't. And I guess I put this slide in lastly because it's one example. I've been involved in conversations where there was confusion where some people meant quality of process and other people meant quality of outcome. An example is from the arts industry where maybe a funding body thought there'd be a quality of an outcome, and in their heads they had a picture of an event that looked a certain way, had X number of audience members, but the artists working on that event were after quality of process. They wanted a chance to develop skills, to try new techniques, and they were happy to risk how many people came along. For them, that was less important. So it's not just quality, but I think it returns to our earlier point. Decide when you build your business plan what the core idea and principles are that you're communicating, and test the vocabulary and make sure that you're all aiming towards the same thing. I'm going to wrap up now. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for chatting with each other. I don't think we've got time for Q&A. I hope you've all had a chance to put your business card in that thing because I'm about to draw it. I'm around for the rest of the day. So buttonhole me, talk to me. I love coming to these things because I want to build networks and friendships. So ring me up. We'll have a cup of tea. Email me, track me down on Twitter, but I'm here for a chat. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Meredith.